Yeah, I don't know. I thought it might be to do with the
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this second half of the meeting of Winchester City Council's Planning Committee, taking place in the Walton Suite of Winchester Guildhall. It's Wednesday, the 5th of February, and the time is 2 p.m. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter, and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. Around the table, we have the other elected members of the committee, and we are supported today by our officers, Lorna Hutchings, the Service Lead for the Built Environment, Daniel Lucas, our legal advisor, the case officers, which change with each item, Claire Buchanan from Democratic Services, who supports the committee and operates the recording equipment. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Can I remind you all to ensure your mobile phones and any other electronic devices are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. If it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow instructions given to you by our team. I'd like to welcome members of the public to the meeting. Those of you who have registered to speak, I will call you forward when it is your turn to make your contribution. Members of the committee may ask you questions of clarification, so please remain at the microphone until after members' questions. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and a timer will appear on the screen to tell you of your remaining time. So we now move to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 12, which is an application at 5 Oaks Farm, Winchester Road in Shedfield. And our presenting officer is Liz Young. So over to you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to the change of use of part of an existing barn to commercial, office and storage purposes, along with some external alterations as well. So this first slide shows the location plan for the site. The application site itself is indicated by the red line. So that includes part of the existing barn, part of the yard area, and also the existing access, which is off the Winchester Road, a B classified highway. The blue line indicates the wider area of land that falls in the same ownership. 5 Oaks itself lies immediately to the southeast of the site. So this next slide shows the aerial view of the site, which is shown by the yellow star. The nearest public right-of-way lies approximately 140 metres to the south. The buildings you can see to the southeast, oh, sorry, let's go back, have an, oh, sorry, it's a bit sensitive, an established equestrian use. The grey rectangle that you can see is a riding arena. Move on to the next slide. So this next slide shows the site layout plan, which includes visibility displays, which are shown by the dotted lines you can see on the access. No alterations are proposed to the access. Highways have indicated that they don't object to the development. This is the application building just here. It has an external footprint of about 470 square metres. The hatched area indicates the part of the building that is to be reused for commercial purposes. This next slide shows the proposed parking layout. 16 spaces are proposed overall, and that meets the relevant commercial parking standards. This next slide shows the ground floor plan as existing and proposed. So proposed is at the bottom of the page. So at ground floor level, approximately 260 square metres of commercial floor space is proposed. This would be a reception area, office and storage accommodation. So the unshaded area to the left-hand side would remain in agricultural use. So this next slide shows the first floor plan as existing and proposed, again with proposed at the bottom. So the existing mezzanine would be enlarged to about 200 square metres, and this would form more office accommodation with meeting space and a kitchen. This slide shows the elevations as existing and proposed. Proposed at the bottom of the page. So the external works would consist of the removal of the canopy and stable doors on the southern end, and the introduction of new windows and doors to the northwest, southwest and southeast elevations. This next slide just shows the layout of existing services to the building, including the CCTV, lighting and drainage. These are not going to change. It's currently served by a packaged treatment plant, which is shown by the green rectangle you can see. This next slide shows the existing lighting to the building, which would be operated during the proposed business hours. No further lighting is to be introduced to the building. So just moving on to the photographs, this shows views towards the existing access of Winchester Road. This next slide is a view looking through the access towards the application building. So that's the dark grey or black building you can see on the right hand side. So that elevation is not proposed to change. It's another view towards the application building, but from the yard area to the east. This is a view looking towards the west elevation of the building with the yard area in the foreground. So the existing yard itself is going to be used for parking to serve the use. This is another view looking along the west elevation, looking towards the rear of the site. Another view of the west elevation from within the yard area. Then we've got just a couple of views of the southern end, which is where the stable doors and canopy are that are going to be removed. It's just another view of the southern end of the building. This is just a photo of the existing structures which are in the yard area to the east, which are currently used by the applicant for the business activities on the site. These are proposed to be removed in the event that permission is granted, and would be secured through condition 4 in the report. So that brings us to the end of the slides. Just to conclude, it's recommended that permission should be granted. This is because the proposal is in accordance with Local Plan 1 policy MTRA 4, and also the NPPF, which together support the reuse of rural buildings for commercial purposes. It's acknowledged that concerns have been raised about the planning history on site. However, it's considered there's a number of differences between the current proposal and the previous applications on the site. So it's recommended that permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. We now turn to public speaking, and our first speaker is the Ward Councillor Siddhartha Ashwell. Councillor Ashwell, good afternoon. You know the routine, but you have up to 5 minutes, and we will take that from when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at today's Planning Committee meeting. Obviously, I would like to address the planning application, which proposes the partial change of use of an agricultural barn to office and storage use, as well as the use of part of the yard area for parking. Committee members will be aware of a number of refused planning applications and unresolved issues with the Winchester City Council for the area. The original lawful use of land was defined as mixed use for agriculture, the private keeping and exercising of horses, and a maximum of 6 horses for private and DIY livery. Planning applications relevant to this site and subsequently refused include, and I'll list them, 01607 replacement residential mobile home with detached 1 number 3-bedroom dwellings and detached garage application was refused. 01814 retrospective for a change of use to a forklift training facility and training area, which was refused as it was contrary to the policies MTR 4 and CP 8 of Winchester Local Plan Part 1. There was no justification for commercial use in this countryside location. Application 1926 and 2004 for a change of use to a brick and tile sales and storage facilities of business, which was also refused. In 2023 00472, a certificate of lawfulness application was rejected. The associated enforcement notice issued on 10th of April and upheld on appeal required the cessation of the use of land for brick sales and the return of the sales office building to its original state. The planning application statement, planning statement section 1.3 of the current application suggests that the existing portable buildings could be removed after the relocation of business. However, there is no firm commitment or assurance that this will happen. The most recent application, that's here in 2020, HCS 1483, proposed the extraction of 200 or 230,000 tons of soft sand and phase restoration involving up to 435,000 tons of clean inert waste material. This application was refused on several grounds. One of them was due to the dangerous nature of the farmyard entrance for the road users. The Winchester Road has a 50 miles per hour speed limit in this area, and the road speed limit hasn't changed. The original lawful use of land was defined as a mixed use, and I repeat myself again here, as mixed use for agriculture, the private keeping and exercising of horses. The thing is still remain the same. So approving this application directly contradicts the conditions under which the original use was granted. For this reason, I strongly urge the committee to reject this planning application. Thank you.
Members, do we have any questions of clarification, please, for the councillor? No, thank you very much, Sudhakar. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we move to the supporter, Samuel Hiscock. Mr. Hiscock, good afternoon. You will have up to 3 minutes, and the microphone is switched on by pressing the button at the base. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to represent our application for the change of use at Five Oaks Farm into office space. This application focuses on making particular use of an existing building to support local employment while preserving the rural character of the area. It's important to clarify that Five Oaks Farm is not associated with the historical issues raised by the Parish Council. These relate to previous owners and separate parcels of land. Since acquiring the site, we've operated responsibly, maintained compliance, and improved the site significantly. For several years, we've worked from temporary offices on site without any objection from local residents. Moving to a permanent structure will enhance the appearance of the site while maintaining our low impact on the community. We are committed to supporting local employment and are looking to take up to 2 local apprentices this year, which has already been included in our application. Winchester City Council's Planning Department has reviewed our application in detail and is in favour of the proposal, recognising that it meets all the necessary planning criteria. I would like to thank Liz Young for her support and for clearly outlining how our application aligns with the policy requirements. The Highways Authority has also reviewed the application and raised no objection. The site is safe and our operations do not involve heavy goods vehicles. Traffic from the site will remain minimal. This proposal aligns with Winchester City Council's policies which supports the reuse of existing rural buildings. The barn will be repurposed with minimal external changes, preserving the site's character. Finally, the project benefits the local community by creating jobs and utilising local labour without introducing significant changes or disruptions. It represents responsible, sustainable development and has the full support of Winchester City Council. We ask the board to approve the application, which will allow us to move forward in a way that benefits both the community and the local economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Hiscock? No, I think you were very clear. Thank you. Oh, yes, Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, are there still farm activities going on the premises, or is it now solely industrial?
We do have the equestrian, the 6 horses. So there is livery on the site. So yes, in that capacity, there's still that asset of farming.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to switch the microphone off and return to your seat, thank you. So following the contributions from the public, Liz, is there anything you wanted to add?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing else to add. Thank you.
So members, we move to questions on the officer's report. Can I ask, is this the regularisation of an enforcement case, or is this nothing to do with enforcement?
So my understanding is there is an open enforcement case on the mainly relating to the yard area to the east, where the various portable structures are. So in a way, this is seeking to regularise that by relocating the use into the building and then enabling the structures which are not lawful to be removed.
And that's conditioned, so that will all happen after once this change to the building is
That's
taken
right.
place.
Yes. Yeah.
And how are we going to make sure that that does happen?
Well, we put specific timescales on the condition. And also we've had the plan updated so that it's clearly labelled, identifying which structures are to be removed to enable that to be enforceable. So obviously then if that's not complied with, we've got the option of a breach of condition notice.
Okay. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Parish Council, who I'm sorry weren't able to attend, made reference to the existing use for office function being allowed under the 2015 planning appeal. Could that planning appeal impact be explained in more detail?
Yes, there was an appeal in 2015, having looked through the history, but that related specifically to an enforcement notice. The appeal grounds at the time didn't relate to the merits of the proposal, the development rather. So they didn't relate to planning policy issues. They related to the lawfulness of the uses being undertaken and the timescales for complying with the enforcement notice. And that enforcement notice related to open storage for the brick sales and did not relate to anything specific to the agricultural building. So it was a different kind of use, but also it didn't go into the policy considerations because of the appeal grounds at the time. So it was purely to do with lawfulness and the timescales for complying with the enforcement notice.
So what is the permitted use for the building under consideration today?
As it stands, technically it's an agricultural building.
Any more questions, councillor Ashwell?
My question is regarding the access to the site. It does go over a major footpath, which is the main access to the primary school. And there isn't a hairpin bend, and it's 50 miles an hour down a hill. And I've just looked at the crash map, just for that small part of the road there, and there have been 25 accidents on that road, one of them being a fatality. So how reassured are we that Hampshire County Council don't think there's a problem on that access?
I think the main basis of their assessment was around the number of likely vehicle movements associated with the development. The applicants indicated that there would be up to around 10 private vehicles accessing the site in association with the use each day. In terms of visibility, they're satisfied that that's adequate. It's over 200 metres looking north and then over 100 metres looking south. So highways are satisfied with that level of visibility and the number of likely movements coming in and out of the site. It's quite a different use to the previous applications, which proposed visiting public, but also about 900 square metres of open storage use, which would have generated a greater number of vehicle movements, but also larger, slower movements of vehicles coming in and out because of the larger vehicles.
So, any more questions on the officer report? Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you. So the barn was erected under prior notification agricultural permission in 2016. When did farming activity actually cease? Has that barn ever been used for farming purposes? Because the lawful development certificates applied for would indicate that it was always been used for other purposes.
Yeah, I don't have that information available in the planning history. Obviously, not having been on the site regularly myself, I wouldn't know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. If a building has no prior agricultural use, would it be permissible to allow it to be converted to for office use?
No. We've got, as it stands, no information to show that it's not being used for agriculture. It was erected, as you say, it was erected under the agricultural prior notification procedure. So for these purposes, we treat it as an agricultural building.
I was just going to point out that the building remains partly in agriculture as well, and so there's one part of it that they're wanting to change the use of. Unless there's any evidence that shows that it isn't in that agriculture use, nothing's come forward.
No, nothing.
No, and also it wouldn't be permitted development if they then built it and then immediately stopped using it for agricultural use, so that it does need. But we've never, I don't think we haven't actually investigated that. We're not compelled to necessarily, unless something would come to our attention that would show something contrary to what should be happening. So for all intents and purposes, this is a material change of use for part of the barn for this use. So that makes that sort of clearer. That's what we're considering today, but the policy is relevant because obviously we're looking at conversion under NTRA 4, which looks at these sort of rural buildings, but rural buildings could be in other uses perhaps as well to satisfy NTRA 4 for those uses. So I think I might be right in saying this. Got me on part 1. It's about the list of uses that's sort of acceptable rather than where it's come from.
No.
ownership doesn't really have any relevance because it's about the land, the permissions run with the land rather than the person. And of course it does when we're looking at more of the enforcement issues and things, and then being satisfied that the end use is being put forward in a logical sense by the as a company that would be expected to undertake that use. But we don't investigate that. It's just sort of not a common sense approach, but a reasonable approach.
Right. So if there are no more questions on the reports, we will move to debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. This application, as has been mentioned, has significant history in regards to planning enforcement and sort of, multiple attempts. Frustratingly, that's not something we can consider materially in regards to this site. But so the application before us, I can support, taking everything at face value, but I sort of do note to the new owners that there is obviously an expectation and eyes will be watching in regards to the strict adherence to the application, including the conditions around certainly C3 in the restriction of use class, condition 4 removing the temporary buildings as set out in the plan, and condition 5 as well in regards to lighting. I know the area well, and it sits sort of in a valley with residential to the eastern side that overlooks the site, and with it being a rural location. So I fully support those conditions and minded to support the application.
So if there's no other contributions to debate, this application has been recommended for approval. Can I see all those in favour of approving it, please? 7, 8.
8, Chair.
Those against and abstentions?
1, Chair.
So that application is approved. Be a short pause whilst we move on to the next application, number 13. Okay, members. We're ready for the next item on our agenda, item number 13, which is an application for the proposed erection of a replacement equestrian building following demolition of the existing equestrian buildings, and that's land at High Street, Twyford, Winchester. And our presenting officer is Lisa Booth. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to draw your attention to the update sheets. There was a couple of further comments from neighbours at Colleton House, and Twyford Parish Council also just wanted me to add some further clarification about the policy, the LHE1 and cumulative development, which I've set out in the update sheet. Thank you. So the site that we're looking at today is in the just off the High Street in Twyford. So the site comprises of a rectangular parcel of land, which is about 1.57 hectares, and it's on the eastern side of the B3335 and abuts the southern side of the Twyford settlement boundary. So there's an existing vehicular access with a 5-bar metal gate that serves land and existing equestrian use and stable building on the site. The existing timber-clad stables are located to the top of the field at the eastern end of the land, together with 2 wooden buildings, a storage container and a small caravan. You can just see it there on the plan, where my red cursor is, the existing. The boundaries to the site consist of mature trees to all sides, with notable off-site trees to the northern side within the grounds of Colleton House. Post and wire fence runs along the boundary with Colleton House and the Coach House to the north, which is along here. And there's also an existing access track. In terms of topography, the land slopes gently up from the road, ascending to the east, with an existing access point from the B335, as I've said before. Within the site, the land is relatively open and sectioned off with tape. The proposal is to demolish the existing stables and erect a new stable barn closer to the access for up to 7 horses. The horses are all owned by the applicant and will not be used for any commercial use. Parking will be on hardcore and will be provided, and no changes are proposed to the existing track, which I've said that runs up along the north boundary. And the only other alterations would be the first 2 metres towards the road edge, which will be hard surfaced at the entrance. The proposed building will measure 24 metres by 10.5 metres with a ridge height of 5.1 and will be finished in dark brown timber cladding and a low hipped roof of grey profile sheet. By having all the facilities in one building, there is no need for any further ad hoc storage buildings, and the replacement stable building would make more efficient use of the site. The design of the buildings is fairly typical stable barn design and is considered to be in keeping with the characteristics of the site and the wider area. While the application site is already largely screened from the high street, being more visible in the winter months, it is proposed that native trees be planted to the southeast of the site entrance, back to that plan, and the southwest of the proposed building. So it's these areas here and here. And there's a condition to provide species and details of the planting. And this will soften the appearance of the development yet further. It's also proposed that existing boundary treatment be reinforced. This side of the high street is fairly rural. There are a number of countryside-based uses scattered along the road in a variety of formats and plot sizes, including a large stable building and barn at the adjacent site, which you can see here in blue. And this has recently been permitted for change of use to tourism. It's considered that the replacement stable building is a use that is not incongruous to this part of Twyford. It's considered that the site already has an established equestrian use with stables on the land. Although this application seeks to provide larger stable buildings to replace those that have come to the end of their life, it also removes other unsightly buildings, provides everything under one roof in one bespoke building. The use of the land remains the same, and the scale of the alterations, along with the additional landscaping additions, are not considered to diminish the gap between Twyford and Colden Common. The use of the land for the equestrian development is supported by South Downs Local Plan Policy SD24. Based on the evidence submitted and the consultation responses, the application is considered to be acceptable and in accordance with the development plan and is recommended for approval as set out in the report and conditions attached to that report. I will just run through some photographs, which you've had some in your report. This is the floor plan. It's an aerial view. This is the entrance, which will be hard surfaced for some of it, an existing gate. Right. See the existing stables towards the top of the field there. Another view. Existing stables. This is a view across the field from the stables. The northern track. Again, you can just see the view. There's some gaps in between the trees into Colleton House and the coach house, which are there. Just view across again towards Colleton House. That's a view from the road. Some various views just to show what the looks like. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
And your recommendation?
Oh, sorry, as I said, well, my recommendation is for approval as set out in the report and the conditions that are attached to that report.
Lovely, thank you. So now we move to the public speaking, and we have two representatives of the Parish Council, Chris Corcoran and Wayne Lawton. Gentlemen, which of you is going to speak? Just Chris. Just Chris. Okay, do come forward, Mr. Corcoran. Good to see you. I'll make sure that you're clear on any questions that are coming your way. Yes. As you know, you will have up to 3 minutes. And the timer will start when you start speaking, and the microphone is switched on, as you know, by pressing exactly. Perfect.
Twyford Parish Council object to this application. It's for a building much more intrusive than the one it replaces, at a key point in the settlement gap between Colden Common and Twyford. It is contrary to the development plan, and the officer's report should acknowledge this. If there are special circumstances to justify an exception, that comes as a second step. So why is there a conflict with policy, and which one? The key one here is LHE1, the settlement gap between Colden Common and Twyford. The policy itself is well known to you. It is the same one as you have in Winchester Park 1 plan, which has 7 settlement gaps, much valued and jealously guarded. Twyford's is based on your own policy. There are 3 strands to the extra protection given to gaps: landscape impact, physical encroachment, and for both the cumulative effect test. These stables fail all 3. It fails the landscape test because of its prominence and new siting. It is moved 60 metres closer to the road, dominates the field, is tight up against the conservation area boundary. This may be a qualitative judgment, but the physical test in the policy is objective and quantitative. The new stable is much bigger than the existing stable, 3 times the floor area, 4 times its volume, and 1.5 times its height. So it fails. It's contrary to LHE1 and the countryside policies of both SDLP and TNP. No exceptional circumstances are submitted in support. It fails the cumulative test. and the officer's supplementary report gives a bit of extra background, but not, I notice, a map of the gap itself. So you've not seen that. The recent decisions of the South Downs Authority on the site next door are very helpful. In that decision, conversion was approved, but new build of 3 little echo pods was refused on the basis of LHE1, including landscape impact and cumulative effect. The officers had supported consent for both applications, but the SDNPA members disagreed. Their decision demonstrates how they think the policy should be applied. Consent here would be wholly inconsistent with the SDNPA decision on the adjacent site and send a confusing message back to SDNPA and lenders and developers, because you would have one authority interpreting the policy one way and one another way. So refusal, on the other hand, is clearly supported in this case by your South Downs colleagues as planning authority. So please refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corcoran, and thank you for sticking to your 3 minutes. Members may have questions of clarification. They don't, so thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now we have the ward councillor, Councillor Sue Cook. Good afternoon, Councillor Cook. Sorry about that.
Good afternoon to everybody.
You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, fellow councillors and officers. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak here today. As we've already heard, the parish council and many people, residents, actually object to this application, and I support and agree with them. What people say to me is they're suspicious of it because they think it's not genuine. The applicant has no interest in horses, nor that he intends to actually build or operate the stable. They even say he does not own any horses. They say he is, let's put it this way, making sure that people know that he's going to get consent. It does not end up well. Twyford is in fact many miles from where he lives. But in fact, where the particular stable is, there aren't bridleways nearby. The land is too small for the number of horses that he plans, which is 7. Currently, there are 4 horses on the land. In fact, I'll break that down. 2 horses, 1 pony and a Shetland. And they are able to roam freely. Now, they say the applicant is a developer who has paid vastly over the odds for the purchase price and is aiming for a house. And if it is bulk, it will make such a mess of such a sensitive and public site that as a house would be the best compromise. The stable block footprint of 2,400 square metres would make a fine dwelling. I tell them, the residents, this is not the basis on which the councillors here today at a planning meeting. You are bound to look at the policies for the South Downs National Park and the Twyford Neighbourhood Plan and make a decision primarily on those. I'd like to also mention a key consideration here that the applicant has he demonstrated that there is no increase in the overall visual impact of the so-called replacement block. There clearly is a devastating visual impact. The plan themselves lack detail and do not show how the stalls are to be set out. In fact, 2 of the boxes have no natural light. Horses need to be exercised, not necessarily ridden, but they need a proper grazing, a menage, a walking ring. None of that. We're being told the 7 boxes, the horses will stay in 24/7. That is not what the RSPCA would appreciate, or the British Horse Society. There are lots of other loose ends in this application which make me think he is cutting corners in this representation, like his failure to show the access properly and show sight lines. Also brief a highway consultant. The particular road where this stable is looking to be built has 15 to 18,000 traffic movements a day, with an average speed on the latest speed watch of over 38 mile an hour in a 30-mile speed limit, going into a 50-mile speed limit. Make no mistake, the stable building is very large, as we've already heard, some 270% larger. It's 3 times the floor area of the existing stables, 4 times its volume. We've heard from Chris Corcoran set out the policies on which I and the Parish Council have objected. The parish spent 7 years preparing the neighbourhood plan, working very closely with the South Downs National Park. He has distilled all his efforts in that 3 minutes. We presented the same case, as you've heard, to the South Downs councillors on applications on the adjoining site for the new build eco lodges. We were pleased that the South Down councillors supported the interpretation we placed on LHE1 and what it seeks to achieve, and they refused the application against the officer's advice. This is what we have here today, which is in fact a recommendation. Please agree with your colleagues so that there is clear and unified member support for development plan. And I would like to remind you, while the clock ticks, the Twyford is one fantastic village to live in. But I will say this to you, we're not NIMBYs, not in our backyards as we call it. We're open to development. If this stable was to be demolished and rebuilt in its same area and maybe slightly larger, we wouldn't be sat here today. But what we've got is an application that's demolishing stables, bringing it to another part of the field. It is enormous and it is not right for Twyford. So I would ask this, please, this committee to refuse this application in its current form. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the local councillor? No, thank you very much, Sue. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Robert Tutton, the agent for the applicant, I believe. Good afternoon, Mr. Tutton. You know the routine. You have up to 3 minutes when you've started speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to present this deputation in favour of my client's proposal for land to the east of Twyford High Street. As High Street is followed by 3 regular Blue Star and Stagecoach bus services that connect to Winchester, Eastleigh and Waltham Chase, this is an accessible, sustainable location. Several rural uses on this east side of High Street include the large stable building and barn of Hare Farm. The officers are right to recognise that, and I quote, the replacement stable building is a use that is not incongruous in this part of Twyford. My client's existing stables house 5 horses that are ridden 3 or 4 times a week by 2 members of his family, Sandy Kaur and Gary Singh. The number of horses would increase to 7, but no other changes are anticipated. In accordance with the NPPF advice, the views of Tanya Novacek, a planning officer with the South Downs National Park Authority, were invited in April 23. She replied, and I quote, "The proposal for this pre-application is seen to be acceptable. The proposal is set away from other neighbouring properties, so not thought to have a detrimental impact. The location appears to be well screened by established vegetation and cannot be seen from the public realm." That's all the quote. Section 89 of the NPPF states that planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local business and community needs in rural areas may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements and in locations which are not well served by public transport. This site actually adjoins the settlement policy boundary of Twyford and is well served by public transport. The officers have suggested that 11 policies of the South Downs local plan are germane to the consideration of my client's proposal and evidently concluded that all would be satisfied. Policy LHE1 of the Twyford Neighbourhood Plan identifies 2 countryside gaps that should be protected to prevent coalescence and retain the identity of the Twyford settlement. I am satisfied that my client's replacement stables would not compromise the integrity of the gap between Twyford and Colgan Common. Chair, I've exercised my judgment in the manner required by the development plan and the NPPF and come to the view that none of the matters raised by the parish council or other objectors are of such moment as to justify a refusal of planning permission. So officers are right to conclude that permission should be granted and members are requested to accept their recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Tutton. Members, do we have any questions of clarification? Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Ludden, the proposal seeks to develop a new stable block with space for 7 horses and a manege and storage facilities in the block. There only seems to be sufficient grazing for between 2 and 4 horses. Where are the horses going to be exercised and grazed?
You know the answer to that question? I'm sorry.
Councillor White.
I think there's 2 fairly big changes to the land. So the first is the new stables are going to be in a different position in the field. So if you could explain why that is, why it's moving closer to the road. And also at the entrance, there's some hard surfacing, I think 2 metres of hard surfacing proposed. But given that there isn't going to be any increase in vehicle use, in fact, it says there's going to be less trips. I'm wondering why that hard surfacing is required.
One of the points I emphasised in my presentation was that the number of users of the stables is constant. There's 2 people use those horses at the moment and 2 people will remain that way. This isn't a commercial proposition and it's not anticipated that will be any increase in traffic movement, for example.
Councillor Williams.
Sorry, the other question was about why the position of the stables has moved closer to the road.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Godfrey, who also had my question as well. But I did have a further one in regards to the access. Do you know what material is proposed for the access? There's plenty of flooding concerns from those fields down onto the highway. I know there is a condition in regards to that, but particularly on the access, there is a highway drain just off the access, and I just want to try and confirm what material will be used to find out what will be running down that access.
That is a matter for conditions, but I would anticipate that it will be permeable material, probably gravel.
Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. The services to this stables, what are you proposing? What services are you providing? Electricity, gas, water onto the stables? Water? Because at the moment you're not using the water mains, are you? Well,
Another one for the officer, I think, Councillor.
Because we haven't got any details of lighting or anything else for this stable block, which we will need. And particularly as you've got stables which haven't got any external internal lights coming on, and you've got no natural light coming in, how are you going to clean out without the use of light and water?
I think these are matters, Madam, that can be adequately covered by planning condition and would normally be dealt with after the event.
And can be addressed to the officer, which I will ask members to do. Thank you. Any more questions of clarification for the applicant's agent? Councillor Ashwell.
Could you just confirm 7 horses? Is that 7 different owners?
No, 1 owner, 7 horses, 2 riders.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you very much, Mr. Sutton. You may return to your seat. Thank you. So, Lisa, I think a couple of things need to be addressed.
Yes, Chairman. So the first one was there is no menage horse riding area within this application. I'm not sure where that's come from. And horse riding arena. So I'm not quite sure where that's appeared from, but it's just the stable buildings. There's some parking area and then just like the yard area on here. This yellow bit is this. No, that's just, I think that's just from the ordnance survey plan. I'm not sure what that is, but it's just the way it's drawn on, maybe fields long ago. So I had confirmed with Niall Hudson that there was water and electric already on the site. So I'm assuming that is still the case. And in terms of moving it closer, there's no reason, but I'm assuming just to be able to, sort of closer to the access, easier access, because the existing northern boundary is quite muddy. So it's not supposed to, it's not, they're not planning on, it's quite a distance to go from the access to up to the end. Chair, can I just make one point of clarification? The application is for the replacement of the equestrian building. We're not considering the equestrian use of the whole site in principle because that's long been established. So it's the new building that would accommodate 2 additional horses than what the old building could accommodate, with some incidental rooms for incidental uses as well. So it's not the principle of equestrian on this site. Certainly, I was just clarifying that we're looking at the operational works from replacing one existing stable building with another. We're not looking in principle at the equestrian use of this site because that's long been established.
Right. I think we've now moved on to general questions on the reports to our officer. So, Councillor White.
I'm still not clear on the need for the hard surfacing at the entrance, given that there's going to be less vehicle use and less trips.
This has gone to Hampshire County Council Highways, so they've assessed it. They asked for further information, which was received and sent to them, which they've looked at as well. And they've said it's set in the report. The applicant has also stated the first 2 metres of the site access will also be hard serviced to prevent debris entering the highway. As I said, it's quite muddy at the moment, so something really needs to go there. There is condition 5 that we'll get details of that, and obviously hope it will be porous. So whether I'm not sure about gravel because that just ends up all over the road, but some sort of surfacing to stop it being so muddy.
A forest of hands. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. Can we clarify the electricity? Because there's no lighting.
We just heard that there is already electricity
I'm
and
asking,
water on the site.
Yeah, I'm just.
Well, Lisa. Councillor Cook, thank you for that clarification, but no more, please. Thank you.
No, the question I'm making is there is no lighting plan in this to conform with the South Downs National Park. Therefore, we need to have something on that.
Yeah,
because you can't run a stables without lights.
There is a condition for which we would normally put on, because although there's nothing proposed within the application, obviously when you come to build something, sometimes you think, actually I do need a light, but we need to be able to control that. So it's under condition 10, which so that provides us for details of any lighting that should be provided so that we can ensure that it's downward facing, it's not too
Yeah.
bright.
No, I appreciate
all
that. But the thing is, there's no electricity on site. They use a generator, so therefore we've just heard. So what are we going to do about that? Because that has got something to do with the planning, I'm sure.
No, it was our understanding based on information that we'd received that there's electricity to the site. Notwithstanding that, that goes back to the use of the principle of this, which we're not looking at in terms of equestrian. It's not particularly material for us to understand what the sources of electricity or whether it's sort of hooked up with utilities. That sort of goes a bit above and beyond what we would normally be looking at. We're looking at land use planning impacts. So I would suggest.
Yeah, well, I was getting at was the use of a generator which obviously cause noise and a disturbance in the countryside.
We don't have that information, and that's not really for the consideration of this committee. The site has long been used for equestrian. They want to improve the facilities that they have. We don't assess it based on how is it getting electricity. There's nothing in the policy that wants that. And anyway, even if we did, then we're not looking at that because we're not looking at the principle of the use of the site. We're just looking at a replacement building and the works associated with that, which is largely about the sort of physical impacts in the South Downs.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In the officer's report, she makes reference to the Twyford Neighbourhood Plan policy LHE1, which she records as requiring consideration of the cumulative impacts of the proposed development and other in the immediate area. I can't see any consideration recorded in the officer's report. Is this an inadvertent omission?
No, Chairman, as I said at the beginning, it's in the update sheet. I prefer, Twyford Parish Council didn't think that I had addressed that fully enough, so I have provided further information about other sites that are within the vicinity and about the cumulative impact under policy LHE1.
It's in the report and the
update sheet.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go in. I know this is already an equestrian, a site of equestrian use, but the application is going from a proposed 5 stables to 7. And just looking in the report in regards to the British Horse Society and their sort of minimum requirements per, for the area that it is. And although it is already in equestrian use, I know we have had previous applications where there has been sort of subdivision and that has exceeded the sort of horses per hectare. I'm just quite concerned that we're going from, I think if this were 5 to 5, I don't think this question would be relevant, but because it's going from 5 to 7, I just want to sort of try and see if we can expand a little bit more on that in regards to the planning application itself, because it isn't a like for like.
Okay, I've had a good look at. I've had a look at this. I thought I tried to explain it. It's there's nothing that says. I know the general rule is it's an acre per horse, but it's not as simple as that. Depends what type of horses, how they're fed. At the end of the day, as I said, the Animal Welfare Act requires the owners of the horses to adhere to welfare code, which so if there was an offence committed, then they would get in trouble. So and again, the RSPCA would protect them if there was. But as you said, there is like Shetland ponies, and the sizes of the horses and things like that, and 3 could stay in, 4 could be out grazing. So it's. I would hope that the person responsible for the horses is responsible for animal welfare of those horses as well.
Thank you. I'm no horse expert, so I thank you for the advice.
Councillor Ashwell.
I'm afraid mine was a similar question. Can we put a condition in of the size of the horses that are going to be in that field? I don't know. I mean, can there be smaller horses? I don't know.
I'm afraid not. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is no doubt that based on the plan submitted, that this is an increase on use of this site. It's a larger building for more horses with more facilities. Therefore, there is an impact on the land. LHE1 does not support development increasing the usage of the land to maintain the gap. So why are we recommending permission for an increase in the use of land, which is meant to be protected under the neighbourhood plan?
It's really trying to establish how much do you think going from 5 horses with one size building is different in terms of that impact to 7, and the harm we're then trying to prevent, or you'd have to establish, and that what I consider to be a very, very minimal intensification of use. It's not commercial, remember, to prevent the coalescence of the settlements. The Inspectorate of We're winning quite a few appeals when we're looking at residential uses, even if it's quite low key. But equestrian is more part of the existing countryside uses. So it's harder to then establish that a stable that goes from 5 to 7 horses would have enough impact to be able to illustrate that those settlements would be visually coalescing to a point where the character of that area is affected. So that's quite a high bar.
I don't really care how many horses they put in there. You line them up and pack them in. But the floor area of a proposed building is 2,500 square meters. From the officer's report, the existing one is only 1,200 square meters. That is a significant increase on the developed area. That is being proposed in an area which is meant to be where development is not meant to occur.
Okay, that's a big consideration for you to make your minds up on. Yeah, and the harm that follows, as Dan has reminded us again.
Yes, where's the harm is the question. Can I just ask, is it possible to condition the number of horses? I know we have in the past when we've been concerned about a field and stuff. And refuse any subdivision of the field and that sort of thing.
I think it's under.
If members think that there would be harm by not wanting to restrict it at this point to give us future controls over it, it's reasonable to do that. It aligns with the approach we've taken on different equestrian uses. And if members think it's appropriate to go so far as to specify that the sites shouldn't be subdivided for different commercial uses or different, I'm not quite sure how we would do that, just quite different ownerships, for use for different sort of stabling uses and use, then we could do that.
Condition 13.
Condition 13.
No caravans, containers.
No subdivision of field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless otherwise agreed in writing.
I noticed that we don't ask in the conditions for, we asked for the removal of the existing building, but we haven't asked the removal of existing paraphernalia, the little caravan and storage containers and things. Is it possible to add those to the to that condition?
No, that's saying no.
12?
No caravans shall be kept on site, but there's a different condition. Sorry.
Yeah, condition 12, I think.
12. Yeah. So prior to the occupation, show the existing building shown coloured blue on plan should be used for any purpose and removed within 3 months. So I can get that. If I can get the plan I think it was on this one here. So there is another building and a caravan. So as like a storage container and that. And if I can get that the plan changed, and I'll change the condition.
Okay.
Oh,
No, can't change.
or
the
add,
plan.
add in storage building and
Just add it into
caravan.
the
Yeah,
condition,
okay.
please, if that's agreed, members. We have more questions. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. There's no drainage for the stables. So when they're washed down or the horses,
It's conditioned, I think.
well, I haven't seen anything on that. So maybe I've missed that. And if I have, I apologise, but I can't see anything in there.
Going to a Soakaway.
Number 6.
It's also in the report under the highways have said about it as well.
Yeah, the bit I saw was about highways and drainage.
Drainage. The proposed upgrade
runoff
of
of
drainage on
water.
site is proposed, enabling rainwater to be directed to a soakaway.
No,
Condition 5, proposed hard surfaces shall either be made of porous materials or provision shall be made to direct runoff water from the hard surface to permeable or porous surface. No, strange.
no, that's not the drainage from the stables. That's what I'm getting at.
There's a condition on dealing with the waste as well and any runoff from that, I think.
Yes, there is.
I'm sure you covered it, Lisa, just that I can't find it.
I think in conclusion, we've got the direct runoff, which is to do with the hard surfaces in terms of the highways with number 5. We've got condition 6 that looks at provisions to prevent surface water runoff discharging onto the highway. And then, as you noted, there's condition 16 that looks at disposal of stable waste. And I think that would be satisfactory in line with the existing use of the stables.
Yeah,
And
but
it's not a
normally in the
house that we're
stables, you
looking
have drains within the stables to take that away.
That would be the waste.
There's nothing on the plans that I can see on them.
Just simply be rainwater runoff, really, and then we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's not
surface.
rainwater we're talking about. We're talking about horse waste as well
So
as
you're talking
when you
about
wash the buildings out.
The manure.
No, the wee. Horses wee.
Okay,
And they can do it in considerable amounts.
yes. They do.
Yeah, and you've got to clean the stables out. So you've got a lot of water going out through there. Yeah, this is a question of animal welfare.
Okay, I think it's noted. I think again, it's been operating for some 50 years with a number of horses on there, and we're not looking at recommending additional controls for all that sort of thing, given the low key
I
use of
didn't
the
believe
site.
this had been operating for 50 years. Sorry.
Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I note that policy 5 of the South Downs National Park Local Plan seeks to ensure that development makes a positive contribution to the overall character and appearance of the area, and that proposals should integrate with the landscape and be sympathetic to their setting in terms of height, massing, roof form and materials. I note also that the building is, from representations that we've had, 270% larger than the existing building. I appreciate that there is planting to enhance the screening from the road, but that the new, much larger building has moved significantly closer into the centre of the plot. And a recent planning inspector hearing at an appeal for refusal to a development in a gap stated that just because the building couldn't be seen, it didn't diminish or lessen the physical impact of the building simply because it was screened. For me, there seems to be a lot of unanswered questions on this application.
I think it's a case that the officers are recommending that the difference between the existing building and the use of the site and what is now being proposed is not so significant as to warrant a reason for refusal for diminishing the gap. And it's for members to consider that when you looked up and down the road, when you're considering the position of the settlement boundaries, when you're considering the additional appearance of the operational development and the use of it. It's for members to make that decision. We're showing the photographs again so you can think, well, how will I appreciate this? Is it so so visually intrusive that it's harmful in itself to the character of the area. We're recommending that we don't believe it is of a building of this size in that different location.
Thank you for that clarification. If there are no more questions on the report, we'll move to debate. Councillor Small.
I'll go first. I agree with everything Councillor Langford-Smith just said. I'm really worried about this application. Like everybody, when you first read the application, you kind of don't see the plans, and it says a proposed erection of a replacement equestrian building. So what I was expecting to see was maybe a slightly larger and a newer building, roughly in the same place as the current one, but that's not what we've got. And it makes me wonder, is this a replacement building or a brand new application? And if it came to us with nothing on this field, where would we be expecting to see that stables? I think we've had applications before when we've approved it because it's been moved back into the back corner and further away from the road. So this being moved forward is very worrying, and I don't think we can really call it a replacement build, not in my interpretation. I'll see what other people say.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've heard many of the concerns that have been raised, many of which I had in regards to especially the non-commercial use. I know it's conditioned. The drainage and highways, particularly around the access and runoff onto the highway. I know there is a significant issue in that settlement gap on that particular bit of road from all the fields running down and damaging the highway, ditches, sorry, that aren't clear. But again, that's conditioned through condition 6. The highways access and visibility, I know that's conditioned under condition 7 in regards to keeping the vegetation down. It is going from a 50 into a 30. I know people do not do that in that particular location. However, we have to take that at face value. And then in regards to lighting in South Downs National Park, condition 10 addresses that. The sticking point for me is, and Councillor Small mentioned it isn't a like-for-like replacement. And even an expanded building size, I think would be acceptable if it were limited to the same number of horses on site. I would have been, I'm still undecided on this application. If the applicant had have alleviated my concerns through sort of providing more information on the specific reasons behind increasing that to 7 horses rather than 5, I may be leaning towards supporting. However, at the moment, I am undecided because of that increase in intensification of the equestrian use on the site and its limited size. Even if this were, adding on an extra field, I'm still content that the settlement gap issues raised by the parish councils aren't significant due to the fact that this is not, it's still equestrian use. The majority of the use is, a countryside use that we would expect in a settlement gap. It's not for housing, etc. But currently, I am stuck on the intensification of equestrian use, sort of on policy SD24. But I will listen to others in debate.
Thank you, Councillor White.
So, yeah, so I too had concerns about the fact that it's moved closer to the road, that it's substantially bigger than the existing stables. But what I'm struggling with is to work out how much harm that those aspects have on the neighbourhood, on the local area. And the fact that it's well screened from the road, it's non-commercial, it's still equestrian, is veering me towards thinking that the harm isn't as much as some people might have said, and therefore perhaps doesn't give us enough of a reason for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very worried that this is going into the settlement gap. I think the parish council made some very valid points on that, and it doesn't conform within their village design statement. I'm also worried that this is a very much bigger replacement building to the extent that it could be overdevelopment. I'm worried that there is no water or electricity run onto the site. There is no drainage from the actual stables. And I think all these concerns put together, I don't see how I can support this one.
Thank you. Perhaps I could have a go and then you can finish off, Councillor Godfrey. This is not an easy one because it encourages people to wonder what is behind it, but wondering what is behind it and having one's suspicions are not material planning considerations and should not be arising, should not be helping to inform our decision. It is a replacement stable block. It is much bigger and it is on paper for 2 more horses. Now, when we're looking at 7 horses for 2 people who regularly ride them, what are we looking at? We're looking at 1 Shetland pony, 1 donkey pony thing that's not rideable except by teenagers or small people, 1 old one that's retired in the field. That leaves just 4 horses for riding. If you're riding regularly, I think that you don't ride the same horse 2 days running because they get too tired. So I think that you can probably argue, I'm not an equestrian person myself, but you can probably argue that it's perfectly reasonable to have 7 animals for 1 family who have 2 enthusiastic riders and can afford to build this enormous stable block and go riding regularly. They're much bigger, but then maybe the existing stables, I haven't seen them or been inside them, but they look quite pokey to me. So if you're having quite a lot of horses on a field that need supplementary feeding and spend quite a lot of time in the stables when they're not being ridden, you want them to have nice stables where they've got plenty of space to turn around and move around. You need space to keep the waste, you need space to keep the food, you need space to keep all the riding equipment. So it is an existing use, it's an existing stable, and the people are proposing to replace it. They're also proposing to move it, as I understand from the questions that we've asked and the responses we've had, because driving all the way around the field gets incredibly muddy, churns up the whole of the side of the field, and if they thought if they moved it closer to the road, they wouldn't have that extra muddy drive round to the stables, which, you know, you can understand, can't you, if you've got the whole field. We've got a lot of very strong conditions attached to this. It can't be used for commercial use, for private use and personal use only. We've got conditions on the runoff, the waste, the lighting, everything. So I think our officers have worked very hard on this. They've borne in mind the considerations of the settlement gap, and this will remove an old and tumble down stable block and some unsightly extra storage and an old caravan and stuff, and replace it with a well screened, modern, new stable building. I can't see the harm, and I can't see us being able to support a refusal at an inspector's inquiry at an appeal. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Councillor Godfrey, I think you have debate too.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've as a parent, I've managed to discourage my children from any interest in horses. It saved me a fortune. But when I was in the army, my first regiment was the Royal Horse Artillery, and there I had the use of a horse, not a Shetland pony, which required a lot of looking after, a lot of stabling, a lot of land in which to graze and be exercised in. What we have before us is a much more simple proposal. Moving from a ramshackle old stable which holds 4 or 5 horses now, which is tucked away at the east end of this largish field, in the lee of a large hedge, and not easily visible from the outside world, is to be replaced by a stable block which is 2.5 times its size in terms of footprint, 50% higher, if not more, with a stable yard of scalpings, a hardish surface of the same size again, and hard standing for parking of 4 vehicles and 2 horse boxes. There is a significant increase in the amount of developed land in this field. It is not just like for like or similar replacement. It is 4 or 5 times as much of the land is going to be taken up by what's being proposed as is currently taken up. Therefore, we have to take into account that this is development in the countryside, which is opposed by the neighbourhood plan. It is going to have a detrimental impact on, as it was reported in the SDNPA decision, unacceptable and harmful impact on the open and undeveloped nature of the landscape between Twyford and Colton Common. I cannot support this proposal.
Is there no more debate? Oh, Councillor Clear.
I've listened, Chair, to my colleagues, and I've got to say I thoroughly agree with Councillor Godfrey and a few other councillors here. I'm worried, I'm uneasy. It is an increase in land, and that should be protective, and it is a significant increase. So I'm sorry, I cannot support this application.
Right. I think we have a legal query from Councillor Williams.
Yes, if possible. I just wanted to know if there were sort of precedent in regards to an increase in the development on an equestrian site in previous applications, or similar applications, and sort of what the outcomes of planning appeals may have been. I'm still undecided on this application.
I think, Councillor, that's rather than a question of law. It's more about planning judgment and merits going to appeal. The law's quite clear in terms of use and changes of use. Here it's about the merits of the planning judgments, I think, rather than is there a question of law here engaged, i.e. can this person make this application or not? Is it valid? What is the use? So you're still in the realms of planning and planning judgment based upon the merits of the case, rather than is this a question of law? Thanks.
If I could just add a bit, I was looking at the appeals because we're looking at the appeals report later. But the South Downs monitor their own appeals, but through that I was looking at there was a recent appeal. It was Mill Lane, that was for stables, and it was dismissed. And in terms of looking at the harmful character, and a number of other appeals that were looking at sort of cumulative and impacts on the settlement gaps as well, and the inspectors are dismissing them. So it's very sound reason, as long as you can evidence it in terms of harm and the coalescence of it, if that helps, Councillor.
Okay, so if there are no more queries or debates, we will move to the decision. So this application is recommended for approval. Can I see those in favour of the officer recommendation, please?
Oh,
I think
Chair.
2. And those against? 7.
Chair.
Okay, so we are going against the officer recommendation. Can we have some planning reasons for our to put forward as our reasons for refusal, please? Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. As stated, that screening does not lessen the actual impact just because it can't be seen. It doesn't reduce the physical impact and the harm of the size of this building.
Councillor Laming?
Yes, it's contrary to the local village design statement, neighbourhood design statement, and it's also overdevelopment.
Councillor Williams?
Thank you very much, Chair. My predominant reason for rejecting this is a policy SD24, paragraph A, in that development proposals for equestrian development will be permitted where they are a scale and or intensity of equestrian use compatible with the landscape or special qualities, specifically the intensity aspect. I mean, there could be also, it includes paragraph C, reuse existing buildings where feasible and viable. And paragraph D, locate new buildings, stables, yard areas and facilities adjacent to existing buildings, provide they respect the amenities and activities of surrounding properties and uses. But it's more the intensity in paragraph A that has led my decision, well, almost solely led my decision to rejecting this.
Very helpful, thank you. Any more helpful contributions? Any more suggestions for reasons for refusal, members? Those of you who voted against. So we turn to our officers for some advice.
Thank you, Chair. From listening to members, and much of the debate was around the neighbourhood plan, LEH1 and the gaps. I think it's very clear that that is a policy that members find that this is contrary to, and that's a sound reason for refusal in this case, which then also leads on to looking at the physical characteristics that I'm hearing that finding that physically harmful with the increase in size of it. And then also looking at SD24, so then that would be also SD4, 1B and 3, which looks at which does look at the character issues, and then SD24. It is quite a permissive policy which does allow for equestrian, but Councillor Williams was looking at paragraph A, which then looks at the character. So I think we could, in summary, refuse it for being contrary to LEH1, SD4, 1B and 3, SD5 and SD24 paragraph A. If that needs to be debated further.
I think that covers it, members. Are we okay? Thank you. So on the basis of the reasons for refusal just outlined by our officer, we are now voting on whether or not this application should be refused. So can I see all those in favour of refusing the application on the grounds that we've just heard?
That's unanimous, Chair.
That's unanimous. Okay, so that application is refused.
Hang on. Right, members, our final item of planning application in terms. Item number 14 on our agendas is a tree application at 20 Hazel Close, Colden Common. And our presenting officer is John Bartlett. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, so just to give you some background on this application, the original application submitted was to fell 3 oak trees, which were also T16 and T4 on the application. This recommendation is for the felling of one of those trees, which is T6 oak on the application. And also just to say the correct TPO reference is 1212T1 and not T2 as on the original plans, but after close examination of the maps. So just to clarify that. And this is another map showing T1 on the TPO, T6 on the application. So further to the original application being submitted for the felling of 3 oak trees, we commissioned the independent consultant Martin Dobson to undertake his own investigation, as he is an expert in such matters. This is a public viewpoint for the T6 oak tree, and it's to the northeast of the property that has the alleged subsidence damage. And another partial view from Hazel Close as well. It's part of a wider group of oak trees. There are views from the public footpath as well, which is to the back of the property. This is another side view from Hazel Close itself. So in further to carrying out his investigation into this matter, this is an isometric sketch which has been taken from the main reports from the insurers, and this shows that markers 5 to 8 are where most of the movement has occurred, with downward movement of up to 23 millimeters and upward movement of 32 millimeters, which has indicated cyclical movement over a period of time. In addition, there has been optical route analysis, which has shown that has identified Quercus routes, which is English oak routes, 9 routes from borehole 1, which is on the same side as where this damage has occurred. And in terms of the impact on amenity, we would judge the impact on visual amenity to be moderate with the partial views that are available in terms of to the whole group of oak trees which are there. But on the balance of things, we would assess it to be moderate. And in terms of if this application is refused, we would be liable to costs of a minimum of £30,000, but this could be significantly more, dependent on a number of factors with the repairs. So 30,000 is the minimum amount we would be exposed to. And so our independent expert Martin Dobson has concluded that we should consent the felling of T6 oak due to its position on the side of the property where the damage has occurred, along with the optical route analysis and the level monitoring that has been undertaken, the results of that, and he's recommending that this tree should be felled. And so we would advise to go along with this recommendation, and also recommend that a planting condition is attached to plant a hornbeam, which is another native woodland species, or Carpinus betulus, which is the Latin name. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. We have a representative from the Parish Council, Maggie Hill. Maggie, you've had a long wait, I'm sorry. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Maggie, I do apologise. You can stay there, but I've failed to call up our objector, Diana Watts. So Diana, if you could come forward as well. Lovely, thank you. And I'm sorry you've had a long wait as well. So we'll go with Diana first, if that's okay. So Diana, you have up to 3 minutes. The microphone is switched on by pressing the button on the base of the unit. And we look forward to hearing your contribution. Thank you.
My name is Diana Watts. I live adjacent to 20 Hazel Close. The 3 oaks in the original application sit on the boundary between our properties. In my written objection, I outlined my grave concerns about felling a protected veteran oak tree, possibly 200 years old, which the council's site description says is in good form and good overall condition. It is imperative we look after our existing native trees, in particular, as they support multiple species of native wildlife and are a source of widespread nature recovery, whilst improving people's lives. Indeed, the English oak is noted for its value to natural ecosystems, and it supports the highest diversity of any British plant. The TPO on this tree was made 37 years ago, about 10 years before the houses in Hazel Close were built. This tree should not be denigrated to a nuisance because its roots have not been given enough space by subsequent development. Currently, I appreciate the shade and other benefits of living close to these majestic trees, including their beauty in different seasons, which boosts my mental health, and the diverse wildlife which live or pass through all year round. I had hoped the numerous pieces of government legislation, page 268 on the agenda, would provide sufficient protection for this iconic species, in addition to letting this tree assist humans to live in a cleaner, healthier environment, given the current climate emergency. Has the applicant provided sufficient evidence to prove beyond doubt that T6 is the sole cause of subsidence in this case, rather than implicated as a material cause, page 265. I believe conclusive DNA root analysis has not been submitted, and the consequent consultant recommendation was made on available information. The ARB report states the project engineer should consider all possible solutions other than vegetation works if there is wider public or ecological interest in retaining the trees. I believe we have a duty of care to such an ecologically important tree, and I urge the committee to carefully consider alternative solutions such as a root barrier and the detrimental impact on the creatures who rely on T6 for their food, shelter, etc. if it were felled. It would take many decades for any replacement to be able to provide similar support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana, and excellent for keeping within your 3 minutes as well. Well done. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for the neighbour? No? Okay, thank you very much. You may sit down now. Thank you. And my apologies, Maggie, but back to you now. And you have up to 3 minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Maggie Hill, Chair of Colden Common Parish Council. I'm going to make a series of bullet points here. The oak tree is not in the garden of 20 Hazel Close, but is within the curtilage of Avondale Mobile Home Park, whose tenants pay a monthly fee, which includes grounds maintenance. The tree sits within the garden of 56 Avondale Park. Tree T6 provides valuable shade for the mobile homes in its vicinity. This is particularly relevant during periods of extreme heat, now more frequently experienced. No biodiversity reports seem to have been submitted with the application. No evidence is provided to demonstrate that the damage has not been caused by normal seasonal fluctuations in soil volume acting on shallow foundations. Data provided over a period of not less than 18 months would be required to establish whether the damage is of a progressive or cyclical nature. Indeed, the insurers have stated that their monitoring confirms seasonal movement associated with the influence of this oak tree. It goes on to say that the movement is indicative of clay shrinkage, subsidence damage. No information seems to have been provided on the consequences to adjacent properties if the tree is removed in terms of flooding or ground heave. The evidence for the removal of T6 does not seem conclusive, as there is room for doubt that it is the roots of the tree that are causing the problem. The Perrin versus Northampton case suggests that local authorities should consider alternative remedies to felling trees. This does not appear to have been explored. Given the importance placed on the City Council's Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, we trust this tree will be protected for the reasons above and for the important benefit it provides to the local landscape. The proposed removal of this tree is inconsistent with the green agenda of the City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Any questions of clarification, please, for our parish councillor? Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know Diana Watts, the objector, mentioned that the housing the houses were built, was it 27 years ago? Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, when that development, it started off with a development along Brickmakers Road, it's called the Brickmakers Estate. That came first, and then came the bit where I live on Tees Farm Road. And actually, the developers won an award because they had actually managed to build the houses round the trees and maintain as far as possible all the trees on site. That was one of the leitmotifs of their raison d'etre.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions of clarification, thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Thank you. John, do you want to come back to us in response to any of those points made?
Yes, please. Yeah, if I could. Yeah, we also, I mean, we do recognise the impact on biodiversity. It goes without saying that oak trees have a good level of biodiversity, and there would be an impact on that. We have obviously advised on a condition for a replacement tree to recover that level of biodiversity over time. In terms of the evidence that's been provided, what I would say is that Dr. Dobson, who we've commissioned to carry out this investigation, is one of the leading experts in these matters, and with the evidence that he has reviewed, including the soil analysis and the optical route analysis, along with the position of the oak tree, which he considers to be precisely the right location for to have been attributable to the damage. We would say with his recommendation and his experience also that we would recommend for this tree to be removed when also taking into account the financial liability to the council, which might not end at 30,000. As I say, this could be a bigger cost that we end up having to pay should this application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Right, members. So questions on the report. Oh gosh, Councillor Williams first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know it's mentioned the area was clay, and the objectors and the parish council spoke in regards to sort of throughout the year, expansion, contraction of the clay. I just wanted to know on part of the report. I just wanted to know, and it's difficult to understand, but how long was where you mentioned about points 5 to 8 on the subsidence map? How long was that monitored for? I'm just wondering whether this is sort of that yearly cycle of expansion, contraction. I'm no expert in this field, so I really sort of looking for as much.
Yes, so the monitoring commenced on the 5th of April 2023 and continued till 20th of August 2024. In terms of the movement that's been noted from those readings, it's our consultant's conclusion was that the property suffered from the shrinkage of subsidence in the summers of both 2023 and 2024, having taken those monitoring readings into account. So yeah, that's the period that it covered.
Councillor Laning.
Thank you. John, this tree is what, 250 years old? How much would it have grown in the last 30 years? In percentage terms, roughly.
I would have said it's probably put on another kind of 20% of growth, potentially 20 to 30% of growth. It's hard to give too much of an exact approximation. I mean, that tree is partially obscured by, partially suppressed by larger oak trees that are nearby in that main grouping. So its growth would have been suppressed to some degree. So it probably would have been less than had it been in an open field.
Yeah, I mean, surely the builder should have taken some consideration into this particular thing when they put the foundations in, to make sure the foundations would stand that amount of movement, because it's on clay and you always get subsidence on clay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can obviously lots of properties in this day and age are built with pile and beam foundations to deal with tree roots and the growth of tree roots. I don't know the exact ins and outs of what's happened in the past. Maybe in I mean, what I would say is we're dealing with the current claim that's against the council, and regardless of that past history, we would still be liable for the costs.
Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. We're advised to reference the financial liability for council if this application is refused. Could we be pursued in litigious terms for ground heave to properties if this tree is removed?
It's difficult because the ground heave, there's just an insinuation. If you actually read the documentation, there is a mention of heave, but we don't actually have any particular further information to establish what you're saying. So what's tasked is obviously to look at the impact of if the tree was to stay and the impact upon the subsidence. There are other legal factors when you look at assessing compensation. It gets very, very technical and very, very legal, but if need to be, I can cover it. But ultimately, to answer your question, the answer is no, we don't have that information. There is an inference in the documentation about potential of heave, and that's as far as it goes.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. What is the I'm assuming we do not yet have a claim against the City Council, but against the Avondale, where I have been asked to take that tree down. What is the opinion, the view of the insurer about Dr. Dobson's recommendations? Do they support the removal of one tree only? Or do they think that there's a need to remove all three of these trees?
Further to discussions with the insurers, they would be amenable to just accept a partial consent if it is given for that one oak tree, and then consider future applications for possibly pruning of the other trees if further monitoring, dependent on further level monitoring data information that's undertaken.
Councillor White.
I just wondered what other recommendations, alternative options other than felling the tree there might been recommended or investigated. I mean, it mentions underpinning and a root barrier in the report. I just wondered if all options have been considered.
Well, we have considered all options, but I mean, with the root barrier, there is still this liability to the council in terms of the amount or above that's been mentioned. But we've made the call to go along with the independent consultant's recommendation, which is to fell the tree.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. And again, not being a tree expert, but it was mentioned by the parish council that there could be some DNA analysis to confirm that it is that tree. My sort of question is that possible? Could we defer this decision for that? I'm looking at the scenario of if we approve this to be felled, and say in a year or 2 years' time we get another application saying actually that wasn't the tree that was causing the issue. My worry is then obviously we've lost this really valuable oak. So is DNA analysis something that would be worth doing to really sort of confirm in this case?
Councillor, I'm not too sure because the document I'm looking at says root analysis. The samples you sent in relation to the above on the 24th of March 23 have been examined. Their structures were referable as follows: 9 number examined root Quercus oak, alive recently. And to form a conclusion about it was alive recently, Dr. Richardson has said this is based upon an iodine test for starch. Starch is present in some cells of a living woody root. So it could well be that this is DNA analysis. It doesn't say if it is or if it's a visual inspection of what a oak root looks like under a microscope. But suffice it to say, I assume Dr. Richardson is obviously an expert, as you've already heard from Jonathan in his field. It is something we could go back. I don't know, John, if you know if that was DNA analysis, was it a visual inspection that Dr. Richardson done?
Yeah, it was a visual inspection and not DNA analysis. Yep.
So the question is, some of the speakers in their presentation said beyond doubt, and we're not in a criminal court. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the criminal standard of proof. So you don't have to be sure. So in criminal standards of proof, it's what that judge would normally say is so that you are sure beyond a reasonable doubt. Here you're in the civil context, which is on a balance of probabilities. So on a balance of probabilities, is it more likely than not, i.e. 51%? So something may indeed be possible. There might be a whole manner of possible explanations for something, but you're looking at is what is more probable here, i.e. what seems more probable than something else. And you've got cyclical movement, you've got cracks showing on the corner, you've got desiccated soil, you've got visual inspections of oak roots. What seems more probable than not?
Can I ask, it's a one oak of a group of 3 oaks though, isn't it? So it could be any of those oaks, and if you're looking at an oak root, how do you know which oak tree it's from?
Well, I mean that would probably be more in depth. DNA analysis potentially. I mean, yeah. All I can say is with all the evidence that our independent expert has looked at, he is very experienced in this field, very qualified, and we don't feel we can go against that once we've been recommended. I mean, he's a chartered surveyor as well, not just an arboriculturalist.
So you're sufficiently confident to recommend the removal of this one tree to save the other 2 on the basis that you think this is the one that's causing the trouble. And that's that in a nutshell.
Yes, he's very clear that the other felling of the other 2 trees should be refused based on the evidence that's been provided and his review of all of the data that's been provided.
Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. A question. Obviously, human DNA, everybody is different. Can I ask a question? Is that the same for trees? Is each tree DNA different, even if they're the same species?
And how much would it cost as well?
Yeah, I think it's a few £100. We've had a couple done, but I don't know if it's specific per tree.
I would have to look into that. I have to be honest. I would have to look into that. I can't.
All right, thank you, John. Thank you. Okay, so we have the application as it is before us. Are there any more questions on the report? Debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. We often, well, not often, thankfully, but we do get put in this situation quite frequently. Well, not frequently, but when it comes to trees and subsidence, whereby we really do not want these trees to be felled. I know John is very passionate about that as well, and will go down every route to exhaust. Yes, quite literally. I'm just, I know our legal advice is not, you know, that 51%. I would regret making a decision to approve this if in the future it was, you know, not this tree. I'm very much along the line of I think it would be beneficial to have more time if possible to 100% confirm that this is the tree that's causing the damage. And I don't know, Councillor Langford-Smith mentioned around the cost of that being a few £100s, and I don't know whether it's worth deferring this decision to sort of further explore that route. This isn't an area of expertise for myself, but I want to almost go home tonight and be comfortable sleeping that we've made the right decision here. We do have to make unfortunate decisions whereby we do fell some trees where, you know, it is causing subsidence, and then the council is liable for the costs of that. It's a very difficult decision. I just want to make sure all possibilities were explored, but then again, the legal advice isn't very much along, you know, or beyond reasonable doubt. So I'll listen to others in the debate, but I really do not want to support this. But also, I don't feel as though I can reject it without full certainty. But that is my sort of opinion. I know that may go against sort of the legal advice. So currently, I'm leaning towards sort of abstaining because I can't make a decision on this currently, which is why I would prefer it to be deferred if that's possible. Sorry.
Councillor White.
I totally agree with Councillor Williams. More time for more monitoring, DNA root analysis if necessary, if we could do that, just to confirm that it is actually the tree and not just seasonal fluctuations. And I feel like although we appreciate a replacement tree, the hornbeam, I don't think a hornbeam is going to compensate for the biodiversity loss of a old oak tree in this case.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. I'm concerned from previous training I've had that substance is often caused by removal of trees, not by the presence of trees. That's the primary reason on the clay soil in London. So I would want greater certainty, but we are not opening ourselves up for a subsequent claim if we allowed a tree to be removed and it caused more damage. But we don't have that. We're told that there's no information available on that possible risk. But we have more than 6 million trees in Winchester District, and more than 1% of those die each year. So we shouldn't get too hung up about the death of one tree. However, this is a very old and magnificent tree which we should not lose lightly. If a doctor tells me that I've got to lose one leg, I want to make sure he's got the right leg. Actually, the left leg is not as good as my right leg. And yeah, because if he comes back the following week and says, actually, we got the wrong one, I'd be pretty nuts. So we have to be certain. Not just that the substance has been caused by tree caused substance, but it's the right tree is causing it. So anything we can still do, we should be doing before we make a decision to lose a tree.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think I need to deal with this heave point because what you're deciding today is whether or not the application should be granted, i.e. should the tree be felled or not. It's only the causation from your decision which puts us in a position of potential liability. So if you decide to fell the tree, then there will be no active claim for subsidence against that property, because the tree will ultimately be felled. But if, say, for example, the individual who is authorised by your consent to foul the tree decides to foul the tree, but then subsequent heave happens, it's not as a result of your decision, it's as a result of them implying, dealing with your decision. So it'd be down to them. It wouldn't be the causation from your decision to not foul. Do you see my point? The compensation only arises if you decide not to foul, i.e. the continual subsidence of the property. Once you give permission, that individual will have to go away and examine of their own cause as to whether or not, if I was to foul this tree, I've got the permission, is that going to cause heave? By then, your decision has been made. So ultimately, what happens as a consequence of it, that tree is fouled and then heave happens, it's not as a consequence of your decision, it's as a consequence of that landowner not examining whether or not heave will happen and not exercising due diligence surveys and so on and so forth. So the heave point with respect is not really an issue here. The compensation flows from not doing something, i.e. not giving permission. So the status quo will be movement or subsidence. That's when the compensation causally arises from your decision to say no.
Councillor Laney.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the situation that we're in, we have no alternative but to follow legal advice and remove this tree. I think really the problem comes from the developer that built the houses originally, and he should be liable, because you know what you're doing when you're building near trees. You should put in the appropriate foundations, but we're left in a position where we can't do anything else but accept the advice.
And Madam Chair, just so you're fully aware as well, there are defences. So you can defend a claim. So I think you need to be appraised of the situation here. So if you decide to say no, it does not mean automatically that a claim will follow. That person will have to evidence the movement, the subsidence, the actual breach here, so to speak. But the law does allow you to resist a claim. So I think it's right, you know what those defences are, so that you can be fully informed of all of the facts in the situation. I can be as brief as possible, but I think it's right you know that, because it doesn't automatically follow that you will be liable for compensation. I think you might get the wrong impression here, that if you say no, compensation will follow. Don't forget, it has to be pursued in the courts. So there are defences. So the defences say no compensation shall be payable to a person where, for loss or damage, which having regard to the application and the documents in particular accompanying it, was not reasonably foreseeable when consent was refused, or for loss or damage reasonably foreseeable by that person and attributable to that person's failure to take reasonable steps to avert the loss or damage or to mitigate its extent. So that's effectively if a person fails to mitigate their own damage to their property, then that way you can say, well, you failed to mitigate the damage here. You've created the damage by not doing something correctly. And that's when we get into the territory of depth of foundations and analysis of the legal, what was the building regs at the time? Did the building meet the building regs? Were they built too shallow? Did they actually mitigate their loss? Do you see my point? So I don't want you to think that when you make your decision that it's automatically going to mean compensation will follow. This can be resisted if the evidence is there. I don't know at the moment if the evidence is there. We don't know the depths of the foundations, what the building standards were. I think there's 200 mils mentioned or something in the reports. But if it goes to law, that will all come out, so to speak, in the wash. Ultimately, however, what you have before you is a position, desiccated soil, movement, cracks, an oak implicated, and the movement is cyclical.
The question then is, what would be the liability and legal costs if we went down the defence route?
You already have Quantum, I think, before you as to the potential costs here. So Quantum at the moment estimated costs of repair to the building are 20,800. If the proposed tree works are allowed to proceed, and it will be a minimum of 30,000 more if the influence of the vegetation was to remain. Should the vegetation remain, the total cost of the repairs will be estimated at 20,800 plus that 30,000. So in the sum of 50,800. That's just quantum for repair. Legal costs, at least.
Obviously, you get paid too much.
Check.
Right. Oh.
May I propose an amendment to the recommendation?
We've just been having a quick chat about deferring, but the trouble is we don't know the cost to the council of doing the necessary work to find out more information. We've already spent quite a lot of money on our specialist to look at the tree that was responsible, and we have been given a clear decision from him. So we need to make a decision as to whether, but if you want to go ahead and make a proposal other than deferring.
I don't think, based on the advice we've received at the meeting today and from the papers today, that we can have enough information to say to refuse this application. However, I do not believe that we have gathered all the information that we perhaps would need to refuse. We are aware of this DNA analysis, root analysis, to make sure that a particular tree is the correct limb to remove. Therefore, I propose the amendment that we defer to gather more information, to defer this decision until that information has been gathered.
I think all I can say on that, Chair, is that we wouldn't have made this recommendation to you unless we were confident in that recommendation, and that is the sort of the evidence basis upon which we've made that is what we would standardly do that, and there's no guarantee that deferring it would get us anywhere further anyway. So we wouldn't be recommending to you unless we were confident that it was the right outcome for this particular proposal.
Councillor Ashwell, you want to make a contribution?
I'm just going back on some of the history regarding this same tree. And back in 2018, they were given permission to like trim the tree back. I just wondered, was the work ever carried out? This is a question.
I believe from looking at the tree that the work was carried out. Obviously, it was quite a little bit of a time ago, but from looking at it, it did look as though that quite minimal pruning work was carried out.
Councillor White, did you want to make a contribution before I say something?
It was just to ask whether we could defer for more information, but that's been covered.
Yeah, if I could just make my contribution to debate and then we'll ask the defer question. Is that okay? So I would like to defer, but I'm not confident that we're going to get any more information than we have before us. We've paid for a specialist in this field to look at the trees concerned. We've gone down from the possibility of having to remove 3 trees to a much more acceptable 1 tree. So we're removing 1 tree to save the other 2 effectively. And the 1 tree has been identified by our experts as being the principal tree responsible for the subsidence. Now, whilst it does feel incredibly unfair that the tree should be held responsible for the subsidence when the house was built 10 years after the tree had a protection order put on it, and some 230 odd years after the tree started to grow. Nevertheless, this is the proposal before us today, one tree to save two effectively. I do hope that it would be the effect of saving the other two. So that is the proposal before us. Now, we have no confidence from the officers that any other recommendation would come before this committee, even if we did defer it and try and find out more information. And we've heard of the liability that our legal advisor and our tree officer have told us we are liable for, the significant amounts of money for the City Council. So those are the things that we need to weigh up. Now, we've had a proposal from Councillor Godfrey for a deferral of this decision. So do I have a seconder for that proposal? Okay, so that is a motion to defer. So can I see those in favour of deferring? And those against? Right, so that motion to defer has been approved by members. So we'll leave that with the officers. Thank you very much for being so clear, members. Okay. And the final thing on our agenda is the quarterly report from the Court of Appeal. Thank you very much, John. Thank you. I just want to firstly, before we go to our leader, built environment officer, to give congratulations to our officers. We have 100% success rate in this quarterly appeals report, which I think is admirable and is a testament to the hard work that our members put in. Have we stopped the recording now? This continues. So yes, so I would like to pass on the congratulations of this whole committee to the members for this admirable record this quarter. And I would also personally like to point out that the one item which I think Lorna's going to talk about anyway is the application in her.
Sorry. Oh God.
It's the application in Hursley, which was the first item on the first agenda as for me as chair of the planning committee, which we all decided to refuse. And I'm delighted to say that that refusal was upheld by the planning inspector. But over to you, Lorna. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to see if I could screen share the proposal where for the Catways application that's in the appeals report, just to remind you, fresh memories of what it looked like, but that didn't go so well. But if you know the area in Hursley and on the corner of Port Lane and Heathcote Road, you've got a pair of semi-detached houses and then a sort of a long strip where there was a house set back with a row of trees and then a footpath that comes through. And there's a sort of a T-junction. So that one of the primary reasons, well, there's two key reasons that members overturned it, both upheld. And the highways, it was an impact on highway safety because you would have a footpath that was being interfered with the access. They would have to sort of cut across it really. And as a result, the pedestrians would have quite limited ability to see, nor would they really be aware that there might be a car coming out. And the inspector found that quite compelling, as members did, as to why that was dismissed. And secondly, whilst the inspector didn't uphold the reason for refusal in respect to the conservation area, he did find that the proposal, because it was sort sort of awkward juxtaposition with the pairs of semis was incongruous and discordant with the character of the area. So that was clearly identified by the members and supported wholly. I wasn't necessarily going to go through any of the other appeals report. They're all sort of clear wins. There's one that we were taking away where the inspector had said that our MTRA4 policy is consistent throughout this quarter, where the inspector have really supported that policy and haven't made any further comments on it, apart from one where they're looking at the consistency with the MPPF, which does always make us feel uncomfortable. So we are looking at that in more detail, and things are rapidly moving forward anyway with our new local plan and the changes in the MPPF anyway. There's a lot of prior approvals in there because there's a lot to be gained by converting these barns in the countryside to residential, but we have got a pretty strong track record on that. They're looking at the fallback and a couple of gap issues that I'd mentioned earlier where we have won them even though they're quite low key developments. So, and there's others where we don't, so it's a bit for 50-50, but this quarter we've done fairly well in that respect. And it's, again, it seems 50-50 in terms of nitrates as well, whether they're happy with that there's a mitigating strategy or whether they're not happy that there's a mitigating strategy. So there's one on ancient woodland where this site for new commercial was very close proximity, reducing the resilience of that ancient woodland and those trees to sustain themselves. And I think that's probably all I will say on that. Thank you. But if there's any questions about any of the specific cases, please do ask and I'll see if I can find the appeal decision and go through it. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much, members. We'll see you all next month. Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you.